everybody gets in their spots. So, welcome. My name is Liz Krueger, and I am a co-host along with my colleague, Senator Brad Hoylman, who will be up here in a few minutes. I'm just going to do a little bit of a run of show to let you know what's going to be happening. First off, I want to thank Marble Collegiate Church for allowing us to use this fabulous community space they have. It's really a sort of ideal setup for this kind of event. I also want to thank Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, Gail Brewer, for co-hosting. I want to thank in advance, but I'll thank them again at the end, our speakers, Tom Outerbridge from Sem Municipal Recycling, Sem Sepulveda, New York City Department of Sanitation, and Jacquelyn Ottman, Manhattan Swab. I thank you in advance for your participation and your leadership and interest in this issue coming out tonight. I also want to just highlight some obvious things. The men's and ladies' rooms are over there. There are some materials that you hopefully picked up in the front. The whole theme of tonight is how do we deal with improving residential recycling here in our city. The solid waste crisis is clearly linked to the climate crisis, and we need to focus on all three of the R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. It's like new lessons for our kids, right? The R's. You've gotten index cards from the beginning, or if you wave your hand, some staff member will give you another or multiple index cards. These have two purposes. One, you can write your questions on them for the question and answer session, which will be after our presenters present. And it's a little bit different, so I'll try to explain it as best I can. In addition to taking questions from the audience, we want to have breakout sessions at the end of the event where groups of people who share the same concern about how would I get this done in my building, what's the right answer for this issue. We hope that you'll think about brainstorming issues to be discussed in smaller groups at the end of the session, and so you'll also write down on a card and hand it in at the same time. You know, I think this is a really important group issue. I would love us to talk about X. I would have a problem like this in my building. I would love to have other people think through with me how we can solve that problem. So hopefully, as the evening goes on, not only you're going to have sort of very individual questions about how you would do what, where, how, you would also have some sort of group picture discussion. And we'll see whether we get those questions or not. This is an experiment. We're also going to be trying a new technology for simultaneous translation for people with hearing impairments. So anyone speaking at the podium, the computer, let's try to speak English. The computer will put what you are saying up on the screen. All right. We've actually used this in another similar model, but not exactly like this. So this is our pilot effort, first time out. And Madeline here will be in the front and trying to fix the problem if one comes up. Again, we're going to have presentations from our three presenters for about 10 minutes each, and then we'll move into, the audience Q&A. But before we go any further, I'd like to bring up my colleague in arms, although we're not big on arms, but I'm my colleague on so many issues, but we're not gun people, Senator Brad Hoylman.
Thank you so much, Liz, and thanks to your team. And you know, it's such an honor to be a colleague of Senator Krueger, because not only is she a fierce advocate for the environment, but she is the chairwoman of the Senate Finance Committee. So that combination is incredibly powerful for those of us who want to beat back climate change, address the climate crisis, and do good things for behalf of future generations. So I just thank you so much, Senator Krueger, for inviting me here today. And I have to say, I'm really enthralled by the bio bag food scrap basket. It is so darn cute. I want to get one of those things before, or order one of those before I leave. You know, like a lot of New Yorkers who live in large residential buildings, I am often perplexed as to why our buildings don't do more to recycle. The fact that, you know, the city produces about 12,000 tons of waste every single day, yet we are only recycling, you know, around 17% of what we throw away, is a vexing issue that needs to be addressed. We as citizens, as government leaders, as those, again, who want to protect our environment for our future generations, have to act now. So I view this session, Liz, as, in your breakout sessions, as a way to generate those ideas and try to figure out, you know, how to simplify this maze of recycling opportunities we have so that we can really get the job done better. So thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the discussion.
So I'm thinking it's best for you to each be able to present from your seats, but if you want to stand up, or if you have a PowerPoint or something, you let me know, because it's a narrow area to move around in. So assuming, Tom, do you want to get up? It's your call.
Only because I have some pictures of it.
All right, then we're going to let him up. One thing about a narrow stage. Oh, that's okay. You're not going to lose any of the speakers.
Trips and falls. Lots of accidents. Well, thank you, Senators, for having me, and thanks everyone for coming out. Let me see. My name is Tom Outerbridge. I'm the General Manager for Sem's Municipal Recycling. We handle 100% of the metal, glass, and plastic that you're meant to put at the curb for collection by the Department of Sanitation. And then we handle also about half of the paper. There's a representative here from Pratt Industries, which is the paper mill in Staten Island, handles the other half of the paper. So in this room you have the two companies that are handling 100% of the metal, glass, and plastic and paper that are put on the curb. There's a whole bunch of other programs like organics and textiles, which we don't manage. So just very, very briefly, I think the main focus tonight is to sort of talk about what works well in the city and what doesn't work well with regard to the curbside program, but just a very, and that's what I'll talk about primarily, but just a very quick overview. We do have a pretty sophisticated and extensive infrastructure in the city. We operate barge, basically truck-to-barge facilities in the Bronx and Queens, and processing facilities on the waterfront in Brooklyn and New Jersey. So we receive the Department of Sanitation trucks. If you live in Manhattan, northern Manhattan, your recyclables will come to the Bronx. Southern Manhattan, they will come to New Jersey, or if it's paper, it'll go to the Marine Transfer Station on 59th Street. From those facilities, we barge it to one of two processing facilities, either in New Jersey or in Brooklyn. So this is just a cartoon, if you will, of our Brooklyn facility. Our Brooklyn facility is really a public-private partnership with the city. We lease an 11-acre pier from the city. The city invested in the infrastructure of the pier, and we invested in all the buildings and the processing equipment. In addition to our recycling function there, we built in a lot of sustainable components. We have a large solar array, a wind turbine, and a public education center. And critically for the local community, most of the material comes and goes by barge, and a substantial portion of it also leaves by rail. Because really, for these facilities, the local impacts are primarily truck traffic, and so the goal is to minimize the trucks coming and going from the plant. That's what it looks like in reality. It is an 11-acre pier in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, which is just south of Redwood, for those of you who don't know. I put on the way at the bottom of all these slides, we have an education center there. We have a lot of tours. I put the email for people who sign up for the tours. It's very busy. We probably do 8,000 visitors a year, mostly school groups, but also a lot of adult groups. We're open for open house in New York coming up in a couple of weeks. want to go and go from the sit this type of setting and go actually see where we do it, you're welcome to come out to Brooklyn. So what do people do well and what do they not do well? Very briefly, since you're here, you probably know there's a metal, glass, plastic stream, there's a paper stream, some parts of the city have organics programs, and then there's a bunch of ancillary programs for textile drop-offs and e-waste and other batteries and things like that. I'm here really to talk about the metal, glass, and plastic fraction. And there's the challenges, and imagine in a city as big as New York, with all of the different nationalities and languages spoken and people living in high-rises. It's a very different environment to educate people on a consistent program compared to a more suburban setting. So with the Department of Sanitation, we try to create as simple a guideline as possible, but there are limits to how simple you can make it. So we do collect bulky plastics in New York. Up there is a child's car seat, which technically is bulky plastic. It also has a foam seat, which we don't like, and the fabric. So this is one that I would admit to you as a confusing one. But most of the problems we have, to me, I would submit, are not confusing. The problems we have with contamination, we have people come up and ask, should they leave the bottle caps on the bottles? And I love questions like that because it means they're actually paying that much attention. They're looking at that little detail. But the vast majority of the contamination we have cannot be attributed to confusion. We have paper in the metal, glass, and plastic. We have food waste in the metal, glass, and plastic. We have film plastic. With the Department of Sanitation, we try to make it very simple, simply saying, give us your rigid plastic, which means no foam and no tarpaulins or plastic bags, and give us all of your metal objects and all of your glass. But we still get a lot of this stuff you can see in there, part of a bagel, potato chip bags, things like that, which anybody who reads the literature there would be no confusion about whether it belongs in the bin or not. Other things, we get things that I wouldn't even think of. They're not metal, glass, or plastic. We get wood, we get concrete, we get a lot of batteries. That picture in the lower left is our glass that we screen out from the materials. You can see there's an enormous amount of paper that slides through the screens. So again, I appreciate the attention to those very detailed, nuanced items, but if we could just get the very basic things down, that would be a huge step forward for us, for the economics and the viability of the whole recycling operation. What we do want are the things that are on the list. Certainly you've read in the paper a lot of challenges facing the recycling industry, and those are real, but the materials we ask for are materials that we have processing capacity for and we have markets for. The markets are lower value than they were 2 years ago, but they're nonetheless markets, and they're much less costly than disposal materials at a landfill. I put this up here. The Department of Sanitation does very detailed composition studies where they basically take the entire waste stream, sample the entire waste stream from across the 5 boroughs, and do subsorts. They subsort it into 96 categories, and then they do subsorts of those categories. And the point of that is to figure out what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, what materials are still left in the waste stream that people are not recycling, and then try and understand why. So these are just, I took a handful of materials that all have very good markets, and that are, as you can see, the capture rate is what we refer to as the amount of material that is lost. So in other words, aluminum cans, we have a 30% capture rate. That means 70% of the aluminum cans, well, some of those are being sent through the deposit system, but a lot of them are going into the trash. Aluminum foil, we have 15% capture rate. That means 85% of the aluminum foil, which we want, which we sell to aluminum smelters, is going into the waste stream. So this type of information is useful for me anyway, to one, try to figure out where the public education has done well, why do we do HDPE are your milk jugs, HDPE natural, HDPE color are your detergent bottles. We have a 65% capture rate for milk jugs and a 42% capture rate for detergent. Is that because they're ending up in the laundry rooms, they're going into the trash? We don't know. Net though, it's called 100,000 tons a year of material just for these items, that today in the marketplace, I probably have value of somewhere between $30 and $40 million a year, that are going into the trash that the city's spending $120, $130 a ton to send to landfills in Ohio. So when I look at public participation, to me, there's sort of two very distinct tracks. One is to keep out the garbage that we don't want, the concrete, the wood, the food waste, things like that. But also to give us the stuff we do need, because that is just as important, or more important in terms of keeping it out of the landfill and supporting the economics of the program. And I'll end it there. Thank you very much. And yes, please come visit anytime.
Wider stage for future.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sem Sepulveda. I'm with the Departments of Sanitation, Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability. I'm an outreach specialist. I, for the most part, for the last couple of years, have gone out, done site visits at buildings throughout the city, so thousands of buildings throughout. One of the main things that I find when I meet building staff is that they ask that residents assist, and I do understand that there are residents that really care and are doing the right thing, but the majority, unfortunately, don't always do it. So all that we ask is that people follow the instructions for building staff and building management. In the event that your building doesn't have the appropriate signage or instructions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll provide them with resources for their buildings. So why recycle? I mean, overall, basically what I'll be presenting is why recycle, what to recycle, what happens to the recyclables, which are the traditional blue and green bins, other recyclables, meaning organics, apartment programs, and household hazardous waste and resources. So we'll begin with why recycle. First and foremost, it's the law. It reduces waste to landfills, conserves natural resources, and it creates jobs and fewer rodents. We're celebrating the 30 years of recycling in New York City, so these are metal, glass, and plastics, and paper and cardboard. Those are required by city law. It reduces waste to landfills. New York City has no landfills. Last one was Freshfield, which was closed, so everything is getting shipped out. Anything that goes into a black bag gets sent out of the city. Conserves natural resources. Instead of sending these items off to a landfill, we are able to process them here. Creates jobs, since Municipal Pratt, and also the organics collection program. And also with fewer rodents, because if you do recycling and proper waste disposal, you'll be able to reduce your rodents and other critters that affect your waste. So every couple of years, the Department of Sanitation goes out and we conduct what's called a waste characterization study. We look through what's being thrown out and what is it composed of. We find that 34% is composed of metal, glass, and plastics, and paper and cardboard. 34% is composed of organic material that's suitable for composting, and 9% is other divertible materials. Of this whole chart, about 23% at the moment we aren't able to process, and that would be considered as total waste. So what to recycle? So in New York City, as Tom brought up, we have the two waste streams, the metal, glass, and plastics, and paper and cardboard. For mixed paper, we provide decals. These decals, we try to be as clear and as simple as possible to let residents know what is accepted in that receptacle. Also at the bottom, it tells you what's not acceptable. So basically, in regards to paper, if you can tear it, we will take it. Even if it has the windows, the plastic windows, or even if it has staples, we're able to process those. So feel free to put them in the mixed paper and cardboard receptacle. What's not acceptable is basically soft paper, soil paper, hardcover books, padded envelopes, wax or plastic coated paper. These are basically materials, because of the way they're set up, we aren't able to process them effectively. In regards to the metal, rigid plastic, glass, and cartons, again, we also provide that decal, and and that will provide you kind of a clear understanding of what's accepted. So metal, glass, and plastic and cartons, we just ask that you can keep your caps and lids, that's okay, but please rinse. Just remember, every building in New York City receives recycling pickups on one day, so you don't want this material in your receptacles for an entire week, attracting rodents and other things of that nature. What's not accepted is, again, those like plastic bags are a big issue. We would love to be able to put them in our system, but they're not. By the time they get to SIMS, they're too contaminated. Pens, markers, cables and wires and cords also are not part of the metal, glass, and plastics. So what happens to them, as Tom brought up, they basically either go to SIMS or metal, glass, plastic, and cartons, also half of our paper, and Pratt handles the rest of our paper. This is a picture of the Pratt where they conduct contaminants that are screened out during the process. SIMS recycling plant, they'll handle all of our the metal, glass, rigid plastics. So other recyclables, so as you remember, 34% is composed of the traditional recyclables, but we have organics, electronics and household hazardous waste, and textiles. So for organics, as you recall from that pie chart at the beginning, is 34% of what we throw out. So that's a great opportunity for us to take a resource and instead of sending it off to a landfill, we can process it. So again, it reduces waste to landfills, it creates compost and renewable energy, and reduces vermin. So again, we provide the decals to let residents know what is accepted in these receptacles, as opposed to your drop-off locations that are only able to handle fruits and vegetables, coffee grinds. They're able to process meats, dairy, and other items because of the scale that we are able to put in. So the way the program works at the moment, buildings that are interested, and also homes, they can request to enroll. They receive free bins. We just ask that they line them with a clear bag and place the items inside. There will be a regular scheduled pickup for buildings that are enrolled. And here in Manhattan, it's actually 3 times per week. Other locations, maybe just one time per week. Like I said, just line the brown bins with a clear bag. Basically, any food scrap, food sale paper, or plants. Close the lid or latch it, because that's what it has, and that helps prevent rodents and other critters to have access to it. So instead of having your organic material in a black plastic bag, you can have it in this rigid plastic container. So since 2015 in New York City, in New York State actually, there's a ban on electronic items. This has caused a little bit of a confusion, what's an electronic and what's not. According to the state, these items are the ones that are not allowed on the curb with your regular recyclables or with your trash in general. So computers, televisions, cell phones, all of these materials that we have increased our usage of. So what the city has done is that we provide e-cycle NYC for buildings that have 10 units or more. We also have e-waste drop-off locations and safe disposal sites. And you can also take them back to electronic retailers. I always ask that people, if you're going to take let's say a large item, stop by ahead of time and see if that location is accepting them. Some locations may apply a fee. So the Department of Sanitation, we also have a safe disposal event. These happen, we have 10 throughout the year, 2 in each borough. Rain or shine, 10 to 4 when we do it. We'll accept, the one closest to here is at Union Square, where we'll take basically any electronics, automotive products, medical items, and household products. We do have also special waste drop-off locations. These are open every Saturday, 10 to 5, and the last Friday of the month. There you can take also electronics, up to 4 tires and other items. So in textiles, we have Refashion NYC. It's a program with the Housing Works, where they provide bins for enrolled buildings. The program is free. Once the bin is full, the building will call and will get service within 5 business days. Anything that's put in the building is considered a donation, and it will be repurposed. If they can't sell it in their stores, they'll use it in secondary markets for construction and so on. In the event that you don't qualify, your building doesn't, you could always look at our map, our website, where we have mapping of locations where you can take your donations. So resources that we have, the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability, we have free education for buildings that are interested. If you have, let's say, association meetings or anything like that, or any community organizations that want for us to go out and speak to them and explain to them how to recycle properly and how to do it, or even with your building, we also have free trainings for building staff. We provide bins, decals, brochures, mailers at no cost. Just reach out to us and we will have them sent out directly to you. Like I said, the community outreach, we do site visits, and we do taping events whenever we're requested. Also, we have the Safe Defense Department programs and waste alternatives. Our website is a great resource overall. You notice at the lower portion, you have the how to get rid of. So any little thing that you're not sure how to get rid of it, just write it in there. It should tell you how to properly dispose of it. And in the case, let's say you move into a new location or you're responsible on waste disposal, you have when is the collection at those buildings. We have an app also. That one will provide, it's a free app. It provides you collection schedules, service alerts, and also tells you how to get rid of particular items. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm so glad to see everybody here. Yeah, a little lower down. How's that? Okay. So before I begin, I just want to say thank you to all the panelists and all of you for coming tonight. But I also want to give a very big thank you to Liz Krueger, to Justin Flagg. Where are you, Justin? Our legislative director, who's the real strong arm behind all of this activity tonight, and others in your office that pulled this event together. Many of us on the Manhattan Swab have been working on the recycling guides that I'm going to be spending most of my time talking about tonight. We've been working on these for about 2 years, and this is the very first kind of public interactive forum where we've had a chance to talk about the guides. So we're really grateful to the folks in Liz's office for making this event happen. So my name is Jacquelyn Ottman, and I am the chair of the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board. And 2 years ago, I founded our board's Residential Recycling and Reuse Committee. And our main focus or output for the past 2 years was creating the 2 recycling guides that you see here. And I'll be talking about them in depth in just a moment. And they are specifically designed for multifamily buildings. First, let me give you a little background about the SWAB. How many people have even heard of the SWAB? And our Residential Recycling Committee. First of all, the SWAB was founded it's a Citizens Advisory Board, and we were founded in 1989 under the same law that made recycling mandatory. So we've been around 30 years. We have 32 members. We're all appointed by the Manhattan Borough President's Office. We advise Department of Sanitation, the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, and the City Council on strategies for achieving zero waste. And we make impact in 3 main areas. Policy, we testify before City Council all the time on different laws and policies that are being considered. We do grant making. We give lots and lots of money in conjunction with the Citizens Committee for New York to community gardens for composting, and also to worthy reuse, repair, and waste reduction programs. So we're really about helping to build capacity building for zero waste here in New York City, and we do a lot of outreach and education events like tonight. And anyone here, everyone, is welcome to our monthly meetings. They're free and open to the public, second Wednesday of the month. And you don't even have to be a member to join us on our 15 different committees and task forces We're really passionate, very active, and welcome your participation. If you want to learn more, there's a table out here with a sign-up sheet and lots more information, and you can always go to our website, manhattanswab.org. The Residential Recycling Committee has had one focus for the couple of years that we've been in business, and that is we want to move the needle on that very stubborn recycling rate in New York City, which is about 17%, maybe some days on a good day we get to 20%. And our aim on the Residential Recycling Committee is to remove the barriers to participation that exist in our multifamily buildings. How many people here really feel that their building could be doing a much better job of recycling? And keep your hands up if you're frustrated trying to figure out how to move that needle in your own building. That is the problem we've decided to tackle. Now, why are we singling out multifamily buildings? For three good reasons. One, nationally, multifamily buildings recycle at only half the rate of single family. And it's probably a lot less here in New York City for a lot of good reasons, which I'll discuss. This is a very empowering statistic and chart to those of us on the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, not only because half of all of New York's waste stream is residential, the 12,000 tons that Tom and Liz mentioned, but the highest proportion of multifamily buildings exist right here in our home borough of Manhattan. So we said, we're going to take on this challenge. Now, why is it so challenging, do you think, to get residents of New York City's multifamily buildings to recycle? There's really a lot of good reasons. One is called anonymity. So it's really easy to drop a Coke can down the chute from the 17th floor and have no one know it's you. Right. The second thing is called lack of personal responsibility, and it takes place more so in buildings that have a high degree of rentals and kind of the Airbnb kind of turnover of folks from outside the town, versus buildings where you have a high percentage of people who actually own their own apartments and own the building, for obvious reasons. You also here in New York, and this is why I think our residential recycling rate is really bad in multifamily buildings versus the rest of the country, is one of our greatest strengths in New York is our recycling little underpin there, just called diversity. How many people know that half of all New Yorkers do not speak English as a primary language? Half of New Yorkers. So when you're talking about language, you're trying to teach people about aseptic cartons and aluminum foil and blah, blah, blah. You're talking to people who are housekeepers, caretakers, and grandmas, and everybody who, they don't even speak English so great. And then you have this whole demographic thing of seniors and disabled, and just a heck of a lot of challenges. And then this is all compounded here in New York because of a thing called lack of direct financial incentives. So 7,000 municipalities across the country pay as they throw, right? If you have to buy a sticker for $2.50 and put it on the bag, in order for the people to take it at the transfer station, here in New York, it's all buried in the taxes. You could put out twice as much garbage on the street next week and it wouldn't cost you a dime more. So it's called lack of direct financial incentives. And lastly, like some of the other panelists mentioned, there seems to be a real fear of rents. And that's something that's seems to be holding back a lot of buildings that would otherwise be more prone to collect organics. So, in a nutshell, resident engagement, the missing piece. So those of us on the Residential Recycling Committee landed on this notion of resident engagement as the missing piece to the puzzle. So, the adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So you can have the most beautiful collection set up, but how do you get people to drop the stuff in the bin? It's two separate challenges. So that's what we have taken on. So we went 2 years ago in search of buildings that were doing a really great job of recycling. And we talked to a lot of gals mostly, and a lot of guys and some gals, who are doing amazingly creative things to encourage recycling in their buildings. We took their pictures, we took pictures of what they were doing, and we took lots of notes and wrote down lots of quotes. And we put them all in these 2 guides. So one of them is called Creating a Culture of Recycle and Reuse in Your New York City Multifamily Building. And the other one is Engaging Residents of New York City Multifamily Buildings in the Department of Sanitation Curbside Organics Collection Program. Because we're volunteers, here's the best part, they're both free, and you can download them from our website. All you have to do is give us your name, and you can download them for free. How many people already have a copy of the guides? Have you seen the guides? Good to see. Okay, so we launched the guides. This is pretty cool. We launched the guides in November of last year. They've already been downloaded by several hundred people. We're doing our best to get the word out. And we're getting written up in both national as well as local press. So we're really glad to see that. And when we reached out to Justin, he said, sounds like a good idea. Let's propose this to Liz. So tonight it's your turn to learn about these guides. If you already know about them, those of you, hopefully you'll be able to pick up some specific tips and that can help you recycle, advance recycling in your building during the breakout session. So, without further ado, let's take a look at some of the strategies for encouraging residents of multifamily buildings to participate in recycling and organics here in New York. So here's a little sneak peek of what you'll find inside. So the first strategy is to make it easy. The convenient drop-off, the clear signage as to where the recycling is located in your building, what to drop off in each bin. So here's the model that they use down in Sanitation, which is really nice looking setup, very much in line with the DSNY regulations. Now, as beautiful and as sparkling clean as this is, it's not enough, okay? Because what we found at these multifamily buildings that we're doing an exemplary job is that you gotta go beyond the neat and the clean and the convenient. It's the old, as I said, you'll lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So, the really exemplary buildings are doing these amazingly creative things. So, one thing you have to do is educate. You can put some signs up and what have you, but Ray Moya down in Stuyvesant Town, which is one of the first places we went, actually created some pretty low-cost but very compelling YouTube videos to get the 30,000 households down in Stuytown engaged in the organics program. So that's kind of cool to see your Director of Environmental Awareness on the TV there and telling you all the good reasons and where to go. Now, another thing is helping with the pre-sort. It all starts inside the apartments. Again, really nice collection center down in the basement, but it all starts in those apartments. So you got to try to make it as easy as possible for your residents to pre-sort. So, and this is especially important when it comes to collecting organics, which requires a new behavior. Okay? So our guides contain information on where you can get some of these nifty pails. You see these pails that Brad mentioned before. In fact, I understand that Department of Sanitation is now offering free pails, maybe up to 100 per building or something. So I'm going to tell you more about later, because they recognize how important it is to have that, establish that new behavior, and really show your residents you're making a commitment to organics, that this is something really important, and that you're investing in these pails for everyone. The next step is to make it part of your building culture. This is what we do here at 315 East 69th Street, right? So here's what they're doing. This is true. This is what we're doing. This is what we do. Right. So over at the Helena, one of the Durst buildings, over on West 57th Street, they're offering free branded organic pails. This is like really upscale organics, folks. And there are all these electronic pop-ups in the elevator to remind everybody to composting. This is what we're doing at the Helena. Okay, now the Department of Sanitation knows this too, and Sam's got them on here on his table. So if you're on a budget, you can just order signs like this one from the Department of Sanitation. This building recycles. This building collects organics. They even have a zero waste pledge. We all know if you get people to sign a pledge, they'll be a little more apt to do whatever you want them to do. It's one of the nudges, right? So they have a pledge that you can use. And there's also another trick, which is a little more serious. You just add a rider to your lease agreement letting people know this is something that we require that you do here. In our own building, we have mandatory recycling and organics as part of our house rules, and we try to scare people at that, the nervous co-op shareholder interview, and letting people know, if we let you into the building, you will compost, right? And I always bring my pail to the meetings. Okay. Hold up the pail and say, we're going to give you one of these as soon as you get in the door. Okay. So the next thing is you want to make this fun. Aren't we having fun right now, right? So you want to be serious about all of this stuff, but you don't want to get too serious. You want to have an element of fun. So it's best to introduce your program with some kind of a social event. We've heard about buildings on the west side that have barbecues on the roof. They invite somebody like Sem from the Department of Sanitation. Have you been in barbecues lately, Sem? Yeah. Yeah, you have, right? So they're having barbecues to kick off the organics program. So I kicked off my own program last year with what I called a lobby drop-in event on Saturday between 10 to 3, and I was delighted to see that a third of our building residents came down to get their free pail and the little starter kit of bags that we gave them. Okay, now a related point is to enforce gently, okay? Very, very gently. A lot of people really are trying to do the right thing, and recycling is confusing even to everybody in this room who really knows a lot about all of this. So you want to give your fellow residents the benefit of the doubt. Now, fines might be necessary in some instances. Some buildings we find do impose fines, but they usually do that like after the third or fourth offense. Okay. Now, like any kind of good business, just like at the office, you want to measure results as best you can, so you can go back to the management, you can go back to the residents and say, hey, we're doing a good job here, thank you very much. And then you can use the input that you get to refine your program. You want to celebrate success. Who doesn't like free pizza? And now, this is where it gets you also, where it gets a little serious. You want to pull together a team. So this can all be fun, but it's not always 100% easy, right? It does take some time and some resources. So that's why we found that the best buildings really put forth a coordinated effort. It's just not the super's job, okay? The best buildings really put a team together that could include representatives from building ownership, property management, someone for the co-op board. But the secret sauce in a lot of these buildings is what we call the recycling champions. Where's Rick Shulman? Rick, I saw you here before. There he is. Okay. So we actually found, Rick's a member of the SWAB now, but we found Rick in his building up at the SWAB house on West 74th Street, being that faithful recycling champion, being the connection to the environmental committee, the connection back to the board, and the real person who's reaching out to the other members of the residents in the hallways, in the lobbies on Earth Day, etc., to really try to extend his own building's resources and be that face of recycling in the building. And finally, you want to make the case. Okay, you need to get the attention of management by making the case for recycling and organics collection. Now, there's a lot of ways to make the case. It's the law, it's the right thing to do, this is the way we're going to get some millennials into our building, etc. But the biggest one is always show me the money. So we've heard some instances in buildings where they are saving a lot of money on chute cleanups. If you can divert the organics away from the chute, you don't have to clean the chute so often. And it's a big deal to clean up chutes. Now, our committee has identified an opportunity as a next step to help quantify that business case. If there's anyone here who has the wherewithal to help us with this, we'd love to meet you. And so please come forth afterwards. I also think there's a big opportunity to demonstrate that collecting organics can help cut down on rats. And when I pitched to my own co-op board about organics collection, I used a little piece of logic that went like this. I said and we're good recyclers, I said to the extent that we are good at, in effect, diverting materials out of the black bags into the clear plastic bags called recycling. What's increasingly left behind in the black bags is food. About 42% theoretically of what's in those black bags is food. And that's where you get the rats, because forget the mint and forget the word extra durable or whatever this polyply or whatever they say on that, the bags can break and they leak. And wherever you have a big pile of black bags in front of a building, you're going to see, look around, in the dirt, in the trees, you're going to see rat traps, because the rats live right across from the black bags. That's what creates the rats, I believe, in my experience in New York City. So when I use that little piece of logic on my co-op board, I got approval in about 10 seconds. That's all it took. One little piece of logic, and I share that with you tonight. So again, the guides are up on the manhattanswab.org website. We on the residential committee are here tonight to help you. We're here tomorrow and the next day to help you too. Reach out to us. We're happy to come to your building, share some of these, help you pitch your co-op board, and we also want to share in your success. If you have something you want us to see, come take pictures and share with the rest of New Yorkers. We're really glad to do that too. So thank you very much, and I look forward to answering questions as part of the next part of this series. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, do you need more cards? Raise your hand. Oh, there's some here in the middle. Great, and we'll start. Good. So, we have lots of great questions, and I think several already of like the big picture issues. Okay. So one was, can we get better, larger images, signage, more details in print, maybe humor, bright colors to get attention, separate signs, no plastic bags. So it sounds like the Swamp is actually working with Disney to try to make sure that happens, or?
I think Disney Department of Sanitation figured that out a long time ago.
Okay.
With the bright yellow, the bright green, even going back to the, do you remember that ad campaign that they had with the dueling trash cans? Any kind of a cartoon, lighthearted, images like that, it's all part of making this easy, palatable, and fun.
So take a look online at Disney, and then there are more materials that they can order for their buildings, is that right?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what did I say? Disney, I
Yeah.
call you Disney. Department of Sanitation.
Yeah, basically on our website you'll have different decals and flyers and posters, but also buildings are welcome to make their own signs. And I've gone to many buildings that are very creative, and they have addressed the issue of language barriers, usually by visuals, and addressing what affects their particular buildings. So again, it's sort of like what Jacquelyn mentioned, is just being creative, and a lot of buildings will cater to their residents for the most part. But feel free, our website will have information, and this is at no cost decals and flyers in different languages also.
Okay. Does aluminum foil need to be cleaned to be recycled?
Doesn't need to be spick and span, but hopefully it's not. It's more aluminum than food contents by weight. Is that right?
Okay. And actually, we were talking about this earlier, so I think this is also our topic. How can we get bottles like wine and booze to have a deposit so they don't break on the street?
That's a complicated, long conversation. I mean, we're not directly involved in that. The state is currently doing a study about expanding the deposit to wine and liquor bottles. It's not as easy as just putting it on there, because there's a whole different set of stores that now have to be prepared to take it back, and it's a different industry. But and there's also different interests, perhaps lobbying against that wine and liquor industry. But so. We should see something this fall from the state in terms of the results of its study as to whether or not they think that's feasible, or if not, what the obstacles are.
Okay. Are plastic knives, spoons, and forks hard plastic for recycling?
That's
Yeah.
a good question. I mean, technically, they're rigid plastics, and they say go in there, and that was sort of a compromise we made with the city, that there are certain rigid plastics that we cannot recycle, but rather than try and make a lot of different categories, we said we will accept everything because our goal is to get, we'll accept the plastic spoons and forks because we want to make sure we get the detergent bottles and the soda bottles and water bottles. So technically, yes, you're not wrong to put them in your bin. I can't guarantee that we can recycle them at our end.
Okay, how about ice cream containers?
That one's, because of the way it was composed of, for the most part, it would be considered trash on our end. It's just one of those items, unfortunately, because of how it's composed, that we're not able to process it.
My building has private trash pickup. I'm convinced they don't separate the recycled trash. How do I pressure my landlord?
Well, even if you're using a private carter, which is usually most businesses, they are required to recycle, and the Department of Sanitation has been enforcing that as well with private carters. So it's the main thing that they do separate in the building, and the carter takes the items separately.
And so so this is likely a commercial
Yeah.
building. Although sometimes the buildings are residential on the top floors and commercial on the bottom floors.
What happens,
what
it all depends sometimes. Like one particular building I visited, they didn't really have a lot of space at all. So they had, and it was a very large high-rise building, so they had to process garbage on a regular, daily basically. So they were using a private carter. But even if private carters can say they're recycling on their end, but it's actually the responsibility of the building to recycle prior to the pickup.
So given everything we know, is New York City ready and able to make recycling organics mandatory?
At the moment, we are providing services to 3.5 million New Yorkers. It is something that we are expanding. For the most part, my suggestion is for buildings that are eligible to try it out. This is all at the moment voluntary. There isn't a timetable at this time where it will be an X amount of years, but it is something, as you all saw with the graph, that it is a big portion of our waste. So it just wouldn't make sense that it will become mandatory, but again, we at Sanitation don't have a particular timetable at the moment.
Could I add something
Please.
there? One of the things that we recommend to multifamily buildings is if you don't have organics collection, let people know in your building where there is a community garden, local community garden or green market that people can take their organics to and drop them off themselves.
Because I don't think a lot of Manhattan has pickup of organics, does it?
Well,
All of Manhattan is eligible to enroll. So it's just basically, in the case of buildings that have over 10 apartments, they would have to reach out to us to enroll. Anything below 10, they would automatically be enrolled if they're in that district. So at this point, Manhattan is actually in a good spot because they would get 3-day pickups.
now,
All of Manhattan is.
yeah, it took a little while for my building, which is up on East 69th Street, to get the pickup, and they both explained to us at the Department of Sanitation that they had to wait until there was some other buildings in the neighborhood in order to make sending the truck cost efficient for them. So you may have to wait a little bit, but all of Manhattan is eligible for pickup right now. Other boroughs, it hasn't rolled out fully, but Manhattan's rolled out fully.
All right. So I think these two are both for Sims. How has the Chinese policy on not accepting imported plastic affected New York City? And what happens to our recyclables after they leave Sims? Do they really get used by companies?
Actually, it's kind of because of all of the news about plastics in the ocean, everyone's focused on plastics. In terms of the Chinese import restrictions, they've had a much bigger impact on paper values and the curbside paper recycling business. In terms of plastics, we stopped shipping plastics to the export market back in 2013 when China had some interim restrictions. So we've been selling the plastics that we sort process, we sell to domestic consumers, and I've been doing that for quite a long time. So the materials that we're meant to get, plastics that we are the 1s, 2s, and 5s. They all are sorted and sold to either U.S. or Canadian consumers, and what happens to them depends on what they are. If it's a water bottle, it'll go back to either a water bottle or the textile or the fabric market. If it's a detergent bottle, it may go back to another detergent bottle or to another high-density polyethylene. It basically goes into the sort of plastic raw materials stream and is sold to. We don't sell to people. Some of the customers we sell to will actually go all the way from our bottle back into a new bottle, and some of them will go as far as basically take washing, grinding, flaking, pelletizing, and they have a plastic pellet that they sell to anybody who makes plastic objects. They basically compete with the virgin plastic market.
So going back to composting, we have quite a few. So what are the composting rules for commercial? One of the examples here is that Whole Foods and Sweet Green have bins marked compost, but what really happens to these materials, one of Sweet Green's managers told me their staff would like to compost, but the stuff is just thrown away once it goes into the composter. What are the commercial rules on composting?
In regards to the commercial, I'm not too very fully versed in that area. It's more of the residential, but I know that there's certain rules depending on the size of the business we'll adhere to. And again, it is a process right now, so Department of Sanitation has been going out, doing site visits, conducting trainings, so proper disposal of that material is done. But I can get back. We have a commercial unit, and they're the ones that oversee the commercial organics.
Okay. Just more and more coming. Another one for Sem.
Yes.
Yard waste for composting, can this be left curbside in paper bags?
Yes, it can, or you can bundle it up. If it's twigs, if it's just leaves, you can put them in a plastic bag, or if you have space in your container, feel free to add it onto the container. But they can also be put in paper bags.
Okay. International question. Certainly worth the tour, Granada. Why do people need to do the separation? In Granada, Spain, there is a new facility that captures and diverts 95% of all material it receives using modern machines and optics. Anybody know about that?
Yeah, it's called mixed waste processing. It's quite common in Europe. It's often still coupled with separate recycling. So they're basically taking the leftover waste, if you will, because they have very, very high disposal costs, and processing that leftover material for the lost recyclables, the recyclables that can get properly separated, as well as the organics. There's pros and cons to it. Somebody mentioned you get a very high capture rate because you're basically going after everything. The downside is the quality of the paper can be very negatively impacted because it's now mixed in with the food waste, and the quality of the compost is difficult to make high quality compost because it's now mixed in with all the other household refuse. There are companies that do it with very sort of intensive screening and so forth, but there's pros and cons. There's mixed waste. There's a number of mixed waste processing plants in California. They don't have to go as far as Spain, but to me, eventually, as landfill costs go very, very high, and we have to get every bit of organics out of the landfill so they're not producing methane, contributing to greenhouse gas, I think you may start to see more of that in the States. Pretty much the East Coast landfills are filling up, and the costs from here to Maine are basically making mixed waste processing much more attractive.
We heard about the kind of recycling of textiles where it gets donated. What if you have things that probably aren't really reusable but are made out of fabric, socks and underwear and things like that?
Well, at least with the Refashion NYC program, we will accept them. Whatever Housing Works and their partners aren't able to sell in their stores, they will use in secondary markets, sometimes for construction, for insulation, and things like that. So the main goal of those items, they understand that they can't sell them, but it's just to divert them from landfills.
Friends tell me, why bother? Glass doesn't get recycled anyway. What should I tell them?
If they live in New York, I can't speak for other municipalities. If you live in New York, the glass, when you put your glass in the recycling bin, the glass will come to us. We will sort the glass out from the metal and plastic. It will go to our glass plant in New Jersey. We have a plant dedicated strictly to recycling glass. And in that glass plant, we have several $1 million worth of optical sorters. We color sort the clear glass that's still above 5/16 of an inch in size. We color sort the brown and green glass. Both of those streams go back to the container market. We sell back to the big companies that still make glass bottles. And then the glass that is too small for us to color sort, we turn into an aggregate, which goes into civil construction applications. So, is it perfect? No, but is it better than going to landfill? I think yes.
I guess this would apply more to larger buildings. Can we develop, or are there more efficient sorting machines to eliminate contamination?
There's a huge, I mean, basically the facilities you build today are worlds different than they were 10, 15 years ago. Optical sorters was mentioned in one of the questions. We use a lot of optical sorters, and robotics are coming to our profession, our industry. So the opportunity there is to really reduce the costs of recycling, so that it, again, is more and more attractive relative to disposal. And we can do a lot with contamination, but there's a certain, we can't take peanut butter out of a jar with an optical sorter. But we can do degrees of separation that are very helpful.
Tom, some of the buildings that we visited actually have this kind of lazy Susan system, where you go into the shoot room and you press a button as to whether you've got glass, metal, plastics, or paper, and then down in the basement, this lazy Susan rolls around and accepts whatever it is you've indicated. So there is some high tech. I don't know how. I haven't heard that that's really a true route to reducing contamination. Maybe a little too much technology there, but it does exist. And I suppose at some point in the future that just the way you have optical sorters in a commercial setting, you probably could have them in a building too at some point. But I don't think we're there yet at all.
Are there plans to move to more frequent recycling pickup and perhaps less trash pickup to increase the incentive to recycle and compost?
It's a great question. Basically, what the Department of Sanitation bases us is in weight. One of the areas that I know from personal experience going to buildings that is an issue is cardboard. So at the moment, it all depends on weights. So as more people are recycling, then the weight, then perhaps there might be an opportunity to increase how many pickups per week. So currently, there's 1 day for recyclables, but again, you've seen an uptick in the materials. So if it's required, or if they see a need, then they would actually add that. So that's the main goal, especially with organics. So in organics, when you have neighborhoods that are being serviced, if the weights aren't there, then it doesn't become feasible for the city to conduct multiple days of pickups.
Many clear plastics don't have a recycle number on it. Do you only want 1, 2, and 5 labeled plastics, or do you throw anything in that into the bin?
As long as it's rigid plastic, the optical sorters do not look for the number on the bottom of the container. The optical sorter is using near-infrared light, and with that near-infrared light, it can distinguish plastic by resin type. So if it's a broken piece of a deli tub, the optical sorter will identify it as polypropylene or polyethylene. So no, you don't need to look for the number. Just stick with the rigid plastics and not the film or flexible plastics and foam.
Can a building be fined for not recycling?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it is part of the law. So if the building is found not to be adhering to that, they can receive violations.
Can you put liquids like a soup in the organics?
Well, it is considered organics. You don't want to make it too wet, so that's the thing. It's just going to be all over the street, so just be mindful that the next person that's handling this is something that you don't want.
I'm going to say probably not.
Yeah.
Like take the vegetables out like through a strainer or
Yeah.
something, let the liquid go down,
Yeah, basically.
and then put the
You don't want that
solids from the
spilling
soup
all over.
into recycling.
And also when it's wet, it contracts the vented on all four sides to let the food waste kind of dry out so that it doesn't smell and won't attract the bugs.
Got it. So market for cartons, boxes of water and liquids, just water. So those are paper products that go in paper recycling?
Yeah, but it's, I mean, sanitation can be some add to that, but basically they are covered with a layer of plastic, like if it's a carton, it's kept in a refrigerated unit, it has that layer of plastic, like a milk or orange juice carton, or if it's an aseptic packaging, it's a soup on the shelf, it's been there for years, that also has layers of aluminum in it. So the paper mill would rather not have that, and so over the years, the city made the decision to put that into metal, glass, and plastic. So we receive those cartons. We also separate those with optical sorters. We do actually sell them to tissue paper mills that make tissue. So it'll come back as toilet paper or paper towel or something. But the reason we separate that is we sell it to mills that specifically have the capacity to deal with that plastic and aluminum layer, and it's in the container.
That's a big challenge in terms of consumers trying to figure out, does it go into the blue, does it go into the green? It looks like a carton, but it goes into the blue with the mixed glass, metal, and plastic.
Anybody here aware of SWEEP, Solid Waste Environmental Excellence Performance Standard, similar to LEED for buildings, but for solid waste? What is that? What does it do for us?
I think there's someone in the audience that's probably more aware of it than but no, I am aware of it. I think it's basically trying to set a standard for recycling programs as well as facilities and how they're operated, maybe to address some of the questions or skepticism that were raised in some of the questions, like whether or not the glass is actually being recycled and, as the quality, that they optimize the quality. So I think the idea is to set a benchmark, as LEED did for green buildings, that it's not just something you can say you do, but there's some standard that you have to adhere to.
What is the city's policy on construction and demolition debris? I know we were talking before about why you should not put your wood and concrete in with your other recyclables.
Anytime a building is having a construction, it is the responsibility of the contractor to dispose of that material. So once they've done their construction or renovation, they should take all that material. If the building puts it out and it looks like it's a renovation job, sanitation will not pick it up. So that usually happens, and people are not happy. So usually when we meet up with building staff, we ask them to please require their contractors that should be part of their requirements. Once they finish the job, they have to take everything and dispose of it.
I happened to listen to my neighbor arguing with Sanitation not that long ago because they had put all these bricks out, and Sanitation was saying these are bricks, no demolition, and they were like, no, I had bookshelves made out of my bricks since college, and now I finally bought real bookshelves. And I was thinking, oh my God, didn't everybody use bricks for bookshelves in college? But there you go, you have bricks that you want to get rid of, so just saying.
If it's a small job, then
Yeah.
sanitation should be able to take it, but for the most part, it has to be a very small material, and it shouldn't be too heavy or anything. And at the moment they think or they consider that it could be a construction project, then they may be left behind.
If you're upgrading your bookshelves, just a few bricks at a time. Just saying. It was just because it was so true. I mean, the person was like, they weren't doing demolition inside the building. They really did have bricks from, you put a wood across. How many people use bricks in a couple of years? 3? All right. There you go. Keep them because you'll have trouble getting rid of them. Sorry. All right. How many tons of aluminum and something do you receive through the residential recycling program versus how much you are able to sell? What accounts for any gap between these two? That's clearly for Sims.
The aluminum is the most valuable item we get, so it's only maybe 1.5% of the total mix, but I would say we get all of it. We get our glass plant, we recover the little aluminum caps, we recover your keys, and with their keys, coins, people throw money into the I would say we're getting 99% of the aluminum. We don't need to be told to do it. It's a critical revenue stream for us.
And how much energy is used to process the materials you receive, I guess per week, per year? I don't know how you count that.
I'm not good at converting kilowatts and amperage. And I can tell you that we have a 600 kilowatt peak solar array system on one of our buildings and a 100 kilowatt wind turbine. And between those two systems, they provide about 20% of our energy demand. So someone knows energy better than me can figure out what our consumption is.
So there's one question I think will be a good group question later soon, which is about how you get your larger building to get involved in composting, because that seems to be a real commitment to do that. But then there's a sub-question here. What's the right policy? When the organics are in bins, do the bins get rolled out to the curb on your pickup day? Or is the building supposed to transfer to clear bags of organics to put on the curb?
No, you want to put the bin outside for pickup, because if you put it out in a clear plastic bag, it defeats the purpose of removing it from, bins into a glide path.
Okay. So again, I do think that there's quite a few about how do we really get involved in composting and pull that off, and I think that would be a good group discussion later. Okay, what's the Department of Sanitation doing to sign up additional multi-unit buildings to participate in the textile and e-waste recycling program?
Well, we're basically letting buildings and building management know that the program is available. The Refashion NYC and the E-Cycle NYC are two free programs that is available for all buildings that have 10 units or more. The only requirement is that they request the service. Once you requested it, you'll have a site visit where the specialist will find out a location and see if the building qualifies.
I frequently see perfectly good furniture and household items going off into the trash. Can anything be done to save these items from landfills? I don't know what neighborhood you live in, but if you live on my block, whenever anybody puts out any furniture, somebody comes along and takes it immediately. So maybe there's just different patterns in different parts of the city. But what is the official answer?
Well, we also have what's called Donate NYC, which is a portal where people that are trying to get rid of items, be it furniture, office equipment, can post it, and it will get in touch with other individuals that may be interested as well.
And of course, there's Craigslist and FreeCycle. Anything I've ever put up on FreeCycle was gone within like half an hour. So.
And trash nothing.
And Trash Nothing, is that what it's called? Okay.
All right. Oh, I think this is for Swamp. So please suggest a good way to approach or
Swamp.
I'm sorry. Oops. Sorry about that.
Now we're in
Swamp. Please suggest a good way to approach or confront a neighbor whose garbage you find in the compost or recycling bin that could lead them to correctly handle their garbage and recycling through positive behavior change. So I know you said sometimes before you can threaten people or you can,
Right.
but you want to have culture change.
You know, public shaming doesn't work too well in this instance, but the fact that one neighbor is taking it upon another to reach out is actually something that is really that touches people quite a lot. It's very meaningful, and you certainly don't want to come across as a nag. The kind of the operative word in the business is oops, like, sorry, it looks like you may have made a little bit of a mistake here. Do it in the form of a question. Are you aware that this isn't really picked up by that this doesn't belong in the blue bin or the green bin? And, maybe point out the signage, or even, it could be, you can help them if it's a senior or disabled person, say, maybe I can take this carton downstairs for you.
So sometimes we see a lot of residential or contractor waste being dumped next to the public trash cans on the corners. It's a huge problem. Often there are cameras nearby, and some people leave their addresses on the things that they're leaving there. Is there any enforcement fines on this kind of dumping?
progress on it. We do have an enforcement, so if there is a location that regularly finds itself with this situation, we may send them out to keep an eye out and see if somebody is caught dumping. The fines are very high, and in the case, and so we would send out, again, enforcement to those locations to keep an eye out.
Okay. I think this is a variation. Somebody who just moved here from San Francisco was telling us to get our act together and make sure everybody composts. That they do it in San Francisco, so we can do it here in New York City too. Yes, whoever you are, thank you, and welcome to New York City. San Francisco is ahead of us on a lot of things on environmental issues. Okay, let's see. Our building has the appropriate signs for all our bins, including the organic waste bin, but people consistently put inappropriate items in all the bins, although it appears many people attempt to recycle. Is this a problem we should attempt to correct, or be content that many of the proper items are actually getting in the right places?
Well, it's a problem that happens across the board, and I think Jacquelyn brought it up in her presentation. The important thing is to start that sorting out in the apartment. Find that most people, once they get to their recycling location, they really don't want to go through. It just seems to be simpler just to dump it in one location as opposed to separating everything into appropriate receptacles.
From our standpoint, there's definitely, there's definitely materials that are more problematic than others. So if people just stay away from the things that are really not meant to be, at least in our blue bin, the food waste, the concrete, the textiles, and the excessive plastic bags, garden hoses, things like that, we'd be very happy.
Okay, so I was supposed to go over before Q&A, so Justin, I already screwed up, but I'll just work my way backwards. I was supposed to thank you all for coming, and to Marble Collegiate Church again and to our speakers. And now we're going to wrap up by hopefully having some networking. Hello. Oh, perfect. Excellent. So we're going to break out into 5 different categories, and they'll have signs so that you'll know it. Also, let's see, their Disney and Swap will also be available at their table to answer questions. And we're going to wrap up by 8 p.m. because that's when we promised Marble Collegiate Church we would leave their facility. So now I'm going to try to point this out. Working with your co-op boards to improve things by the small couches over there with Dawn with her hand up. Thank you. Working with landlords and management to improve the model in your building. The kitchen back there on the way to the men's and women's room with Brad and the sign there. Convincing neighbors to participate, sort correctly. Justin over here in the front corner. Challenges specific to composting. Behind the audience, just in the back. Oh, wait, who's composting? So, right there, sorry. Thank you. And finally, cleanliness and vermin will also, hi there, cleanliness and vermin, the nice gentleman there with the blue jacket on. So you're not obligated to go to any of these, but we thought that these were topics that a number of people might find group think about being helpful. So again, if you're leaving or even if you're just breaking out into groups, thank you. And I want everybody to applaud our fabulous